Welcome, everybody. It's Friday here on the Alabama Crimson Tide on AL.com Facebook page. Thanks for joining us today. We've got some news surrounding the Alabama football team that we're going to talk about and update you on and make sure you have all the facts about this story. I'm joined to talk about that by Matt Zenitz, our Alabama beat reporter. So the big news, Matt, obviously in the last 24 hours is with players starting to return to campus right now. A few of them have tested positive for COVID-19. Just to kind of start us off here, can you give us the facts about what we know? When was this discovered? When did Alabama find out about these positive tests? And just what do we know about what's happened so far?
Yeah, so they found out during the course of the last couple of days. So obviously, as everyone's aware of, players have started to make their way back to campus during the course of the past week or so. And as players have started to get back to campus, Alabama's begun the process of getting players tested to see if they have anybody who's currently dealing with the coronavirus. Dealing with coronavirus, COVID-19, and at this point, don't have the exact number of positive tests, but what I do have confirmation on is that there are several players that have tested positive at this point. And one of the things that's problematic for Alabama is that some of the guys, or at least one of the guys that has tested positive at this point, was out there for those player-led workout sessions throughout the course of this week, potentially exposing some other players to this virus, some of those players that had tested negative at this point, who it sounds like at least some of those guys are going to have to be retested now.
As far as we know, Matt, any issues in terms of these guys actually feeling sick? Was this a case of asymptomatic guys testing positive, or are these? Is anybody?
Yeah, so I'll talk specifically about the player that I was referring to that was out at the workout. So that player who was out there was asymptomatic at that point. I'm not sure about all of the other players that have tested positive at this point, but I know specifically with that player that was referenced that had been out there for those workouts, that while he was out there for those workouts on Tuesday and Wednesday, that he was asymptomatic at that point.
So these players that have been training together, firstly, just to clarify, this is not sort of official team sanctioned workouts that we're talking about here, right? These are private workouts.
Yeah, that the coaching staff had nothing to do with
right.
coordinating. This was completely the players doing that on their own and coordinating that themselves.
And so what do we know about these private workouts that have been going on? How have these players involved in it? Are they living together? Are they just out there practicing together? Like, what do we know in terms of how the other guys at that workout may have been exposed?
Yeah, so I'm not sure on living situations at this point. I would assume that wherever players would typically live when they're here on campus, if that's where they're living at this point, at least in terms of the guys that have tested negative at this point. But with those workouts, once again, those player-led sessions, players have been out there working out together, just getting work in before things get started as far as the voluntary sessions at Alabama. And a good amount of guys have been out there for those workouts. Top receivers have been out there, several defensive backs, all three of scholarship quarterbacks, some other players to go along with that. So there have definitely been a good amount of players out there for those sessions. And obviously, the player I was referring to, and it seems like potentially he's not the only one who tested positive that was maybe out there for those workouts, that at that point, obviously, they did not know that they had COVID-19 or
right.
that they were had tested positive. That was something that found out about later on.
So when does the full team, when is the full team sort of scheduled to come back onto campus and arrive and start working together officially as a team with the coaching staff?
So things have been set to start June 8th. I'm not sure if several guys testing positive changes things in terms of that, especially considering I would assume, have to retest a good amount of guys now, just considering exposure to some of the players that have tested positive. So I'm not sure if this will set that back at all in terms of starting workouts on June 8th, but at least right now, that's when things are scheduled to start.
And Matt, obviously, we're talking about, between 85 and 10 guys, something like that, when the team comes back onto campus that they're having to account for here and worry about this logistically. The problem obviously reaches a different level of difficulty for Alabama when the remainder of students come back to campus, which won't be for another couple of months. But we do know that Alabama is currently planning to hold classes on campus as usual in the fall. I believe they approved that this week. So in terms of logistics for Alabama, trying to make sure that this doesn't spread through the whole team, you would imagine they have one set of policies for what's going on this summer, but it will probably have to change once we're talking about tens of thousands of more students coming back to campus in the fall, right?
Yep, it's a complicated deal. Unfortunately, there's some people that are much smarter than me figuring out how to minimize the risk that comes along with that for players. But I'm sure people have seen all of the different videos that teams are putting out around the country. Even like Auburn, for example, put out a video where it's the first hype video I've ever seen in my life, where it starts off with somebody getting a temperature check. So all these teams are taking precautions as much as possible and trying to minimize the risk as much as they possibly can in terms of players contracting, catching this virus, and then also somebody has it, preventing it from spreading to other people. So with like Alabama, for example, one of the things I've heard is that players have tested positive, that they'll be going somewhere else to quarantine and go through that process, so Alabama can try to minimize the spread of that to other players as much as possible. Just unfortunately for them, once again, one of the things that is problematic and difficult is just that before these players found out that they were positive, that at least one of them and potentially more had been out there exposed to other players.
Well, these are very strange times, Matt. This is certainly a situation none of us have dealt with or covered before. We've covered a lot of things in our sport, but we've never seen anything like this before. I really appreciate you being on top of the facts here and helping us have a good understanding of what actually has happened and what's going on. And obviously, we've got a lot more coverage from you on that over at AL.com. So thanks again for joining us for this, Matt.
Always good to be on with you, man.